Hello. Oh, where's it all gone? Hello. Hi. Welcome to week 4. Hello, book club. How's it going? Good morning, good morning, good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I think I'm live. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to join me live. I know I've had a couple of comments this week that you're going to try and get here, so that's fantastic. But I'm going to just crack into it and we'll see if anyone joins along the way. I do want to get on with them quite quickly. Oh, hi Judith. I do want to get on with them quite quickly because most people are watching on the replay, so I don't want a lot of faffing at the beginning. And also one of the things that drives me nuts about lives is when somebody like welcomes each and every person that jumps on, but there's like hundreds, like dozens of people. Hi Bron, how's it going? Yay! So this is actually the first time I've done a live, and there has been people here live, and I've known about it because actually there was one where someone joined but I didn't know. So thank you for commenting, and if you're watching the replay, please just pop in your comments as we go, or as you have any kind of insights and ahas along the way. So before we kick off week 4, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I work, which is the Turrbal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Sorry, you can hear my cat in the background. She's being very pesky this morning. I think she needs some attention. Hopefully she will settle down. So, let's have a look at what we have in store this week. If you've got your copy of the book handy, it is, which way? I don't know if we can do it. Backwards in my brain. It is chapter 4 that we're looking for today, that we're reading from today, and we're at week 4 of 6, and we're going to be looking at your book planning style. So just to give you an idea what this means, so you've looked at scoping your book, the messaging, the why, how, who, what, where, that kind of thing. You should have this kind of container to know what is staying in the book and what is not welcome in the book, so that you're really clear what this book is, what it's here to do, what problem it's here to solve, all the things. So really, this is the part of Destination Author where we move into action and actually start getting some words down and that kind of thing. Now I know people watching will be further along than this, but it's still worth sticking around for because it gives you insight into just what to expect from different approaches, and I don't want anyone here to think that one approach is better than the other, or that the way you've been writing your book is wrong. It's just that how you do it will inform what comes later and what you're going to need to focus on later. So if you write in one kind of style and you plan in one kind of style, there are going to be certain gaps, and vice versa. So that's what we're talking about today. Essentially, this class will enable you to outline your book, but if you are further down the track, like I said, there are those pitfalls on both sides that you're going to be able to have a full picture of by the end of this. I have also got a free course on outlining, which is on my website. If you just go to krisemery.com, there is an outlining a mini course on there which is delivered by email, which goes into this, not the same topic, but does go into outlining and how to do it as well. It's also in Destination Author, but I just wanted to mention the course because I know Judith has found it helpful and is going through it a second time to get her messaging for her marketing all together. So and she's finding that really helpful, so I just wanted to give a shout out to that. I'll drop the link in the comments when we wrap up. And also a heads up about today, there's going to be a bit of writing jargon, and I want to use that writing jargon to shine a light on what it means, because you might, if you're in other writing groups, then you might see these words mentioned, and especially if you intend to do NaNoWriMo, where there's lots of writers who are seasoned writers who have written before. These words do pop up, and I do find that the kind of literary circles can be a little bit snobby about jargon, so I'm going to tell you what these words mean. So, what kind of outline is best for you? Are you the kind of person who's really thorough, really detailed, and plans and plans and plans, and gets clearer and clearer and more granular in your plan so that you've got a lot of detail in there before you start writing? So writing might come further down the line. Do you stay in planning mode for a really long time, get really clear before you dare put a word on the page? Or do you start to write before you have that detail and you just let it flow? So you're winging it, some people channel, so if you're a more spiritual person, that's just when you get into a very present mode and you just let it flow out of your fingers, and what will come onto the page is what is meant to be. Just a download, some people call it, a dump. They just write. So let me know in the comments which one you think you are, if you're attending live or if you're watching the replay. Judith is saying she lets it flow, which is, both of these approaches are perfectly valid. So those two things, one of those is called planning or plotting, and the other aspect is called pantsing. Oh, Bron is saying a bit of both. That's very interesting, because that is what I'm going to advocate for today. So planning is that very stringent side, and pantsing, it really stands for flying by the seat of your pants-ing. So that there's those two approaches that get talked about. So if you see in writers groups any reference to pantsing, that is what they're talking about, just going with it. So Judith is saying, when I just download it, all slowly forms into something. And Bron is saying, I've become an expert in both. Okay, that's really cool. So yes, Judith, when it slowly forms into something, that is exactly what tends to happen, which I'm going to talk about today. So the part of Destination Author that we are, I'm going to read from right now, is pages, if you've got the print copy, it's pages 78 to 80. So I call this roots or wings. Roots being that very grounded, very planned out version, and wings being that off, untethered, let's just go for it, very free-flowing, creative kind of thing. So page 78. Creating on the fly can be the only way for some people. One of my clients, Lou, is a total pantser, flying by the seat of her pantser. She is highly intuitive and a spiritual person who has tried to stick to an outline, and I mean really tried. Like we had so many difficult phone calls when we were working together where she was just like, I'm really trying to stick to what I said I'd stick to, but I just can't. She's tried to stick to an outline, but is just a natural born storyteller who needs to flow with what comes forth on the day. Trying to hem her in, well, first of all, never going to happen. She's a free spirit who can't be put in a box. However, it also doesn't get the best from her. She talks about going into the creative cave where she can feel a book is ready to come through. When it's there, she'll write and write and write like something has taken her over. Until it's there, there is no forcing it. Lou won't draft on demand. If it's ready, it's ready. If it's not, it's not. And just an aside, she's actually, her third book has been percolating for a long time, and she reckons that like her cycle of writing books is about 2 years. And I would say that's roughly how long it's been since the last time she went into that creative cave and just like let it all. She'll go, because she works for herself, she has that privilege of being able to work full time on her book as and when it is ready. So if it's there, it's coming out. So I'll keep you posted as to how she goes on her third one, because it'll be really interesting to see her do it for the third time if the process has stayed the same. And she honestly really has tried to stick to an outline, but she just, she's such a natural, kinesthetic, in touch kind of person. So, okay, page 79, let's continue. The way Lou goes from her outpouring flow state into book mode is to hire me as her editor and do more passes in the editing phase than many of my other clients. This is almost spiritual for her too, because the stripping back and stripping back to leave the real gold behind in the eventual manuscript is cleansing and transformational. It helps her let go of attachments to her past, and we all write things in our first draft that are raw and vulnerable and just blurted out, that then when we think about sharing that with an audience, maybe needs to come out, because actually what we needed to do was express it, and just by expressing it we release that charge that we've got with it, and we realize actually that's not relevant to the book. I just needed to get it out. I just needed to say it. So that's where Lou often is. It helps her let go of attachments to her past. It helps her transmute old beliefs and stories so that she can show up with conviction as an author and honor the lessons she's teaching. Heck, it's a process, but she knows it. She prepares, she calls in the money to pay for it, she takes her role as an author seriously, and she more than pays her dues. You can catch her talking about it in our interview on my portfolio, which is krisemery.com/category /case -study. That's a bit of a mouthful. I'll pop that link into the comments later. And Bron, yeah, very much relate to needing to unload stuff. And it's funny because I wrote my first sort of practice book. I didn't think it was a practice book at the time. I was very serious about it at the time. Looking back, I might have made a better attempt at it if I had done more editing and taken out some of that quite raw stuff, but I was still very charged about it. And I actually tell that story somewhere in Destination Author as well. It might be earlier in the book actually. So yeah, like, there are certain kinds of people that find writing very therapeutic. I am one of them, and lots of people conflate writing a book with personal writing, journaling, writing to heal. And I'm not saying they're completely separate, but it's going back to that idea of having an audience that I spoke about in week 2 or 3. Sorry, there's a really... First the cat, now there's a really noisy bird right outside the window distracting me. Yes, so that is the order to do it. First, get it out, because then you release that charge to it, and then you can, in your second pass, third pass, however many drafts you do, you can look at it more objectively, because you have been allowed to let it out, you've expressed it. But what some people don't do is check in with how appropriate it is to keep it in the book. And I find a lot of memoir writers actually, they write very vulnerable things, but it is a little bit, it's a little bit word vomit and not very sort of processed and thought through. What is the point of telling people this apart from for me? So yeah, it's important to get things out, but it's also important, I think, to check in with it later on, which we'll come to in a sec. So there's no other way for some people. I'm talking about there's no other way of writing for some people apart from pantsing. For others, screw doing multiple drafts. Enter the planners of the world. Planners want to know where this is going before they start. They're strategic. They know the job of each chapter. They know the content of each section. They order their paragraphs deliberately, and you better believe they don't waste a word. Wastage is kryptonite for these efficient people. They can sit down and know exactly what has to be written that day and just get down to business. My client Lorraine is one of these types of writers. As a business person and former engineer, she is structured in her approach to creating training material for her clients and marketing content for her offers. Yes, she works on her mindset and actively plays with her creativity. However, Lorraine also knows where she is in her plan at all times. And I envy these people so much because this is not me at all. As a one and done girl, in her words, she is used to doing a great first draft, polishing it quickly, and then shipping her work. In other words, she's really good at getting things out the door and ready for her audience to buy. I interviewed Lorraine for my portfolio after her book was published, which you can also see at chrisemery.com/category/case-study. And when we chatted, Lorraine told me that her tactic for getting the book written was to always end a writing session with a question to answer when she next sat down to write. So smart. So that she wouldn't get stuck. Smart, right? Strategy within strategy. I'd expect nothing less. When Lorraine first came to me to chat about her book, despite being incredibly structured in her work and having a signature system she wanted to convey, it was the structure that she was hung up on the most, which I found so interesting because of the way her brain works. It was very well structured when I got stuck into it. Perhaps her high standards of what structure looked like were making her question herself when it came to writing something more fluid and storied. But I have another suspicion. I believe Lorraine was so used to working in a structured way, and it came so naturally to her that she'd written a whole book almost without having to bump up against a lot of the structural challenges that many first-time book writers face. Planning and fleshing out the plan and detailing and then dropping in case studies is a brilliant way to make a book happen. There's no other way for some people. For others, boring. So that is a planning in a nutshell. Rigid outlining. Thanks for coming, Judith. I know you have to hop off now. Rigid outlining, fleshing out the outline, fleshing out the sections within the sections, and you'll have a lot of words in your plan already by the time you even come to sit down to write, and probably can just drop in pieces of content that you already have. So that is obviously a huge advantage. So if you're here live or on the replay, I'd love to know what you think the benefits of those two approaches are. So the thorough planning and the pantsing or going with the flow kind of options. So I cover what the benefits are, the pros and cons in Destination Author. And so I'm just going to read through the list right now. So pros and cons of planning and pantsing. While you can't exactly choose which one you are, and your approach is very much part of your personality, here's an overview of the benefits and drawbacks of each approach. So Albron is saying pantsing allows one to dump all the things you want to write. Planning keeps things under control. Exactly. So pantsing is really good for getting ideas out when they're really fresh in your mind. You know when you have an idea and you need to get it down, because when you come back to it later, it's just not the same. And this happens quite often if you're like when you're falling asleep and you're like, oh, I'll remember it in the morning. I sometimes will just turn my lights on and like scribble it down as it was meant to come out, because if I don't stop, drop and write, I know that that idea is just lost forever. So that is a huge benefit of pantsing. It gets those ideas when they're fresh and when you haven't had time to like overthink them too much. Really, really important. So pantsing pros, super creative, connected to emotions. So when you have that idea and you just write in the moment, you're very close to the emotion that was experienced at the time, and that can really come through in the way that you express it. Responsive to what's going on in the world like right now. So when you're pantsing, you can be very current about what you're writing, and this is really great on social media and blogs and things like that. Possibly less so in a book, because a book should be evergreen if it's going to be useful. Evergreen meaning it doesn't date when you use the information. When you have information in there, you want it to stay current. So it's evergreen kind of means timeless. So when you're pantsing and just going with it, you can run with a trend and that kind of thing, which can be really great for getting attention. In your book, yeah, do be wary of that. Expressive, fresh and surprising, drawing from what you observe in real life. I quite often find myself inspired to just go with the pantsing version when I'm out and about, writing in a cafe and, you know, taking in things that are around me. And embodied as well. So you're writing in the moment, so that is truth almost, because you don't have time to overthink, like we were saying. And yeah, Bron, totally. Overthinking is a killer of good ideas. Like that's a brilliant, succinct way of putting it. 100% agree. So the downsides of pantsing are creating meandering writing that goes off topic. I mean, digression is pantsing in a nutshell. Like you just write whatever, and that can be good, but of course that's going to require something later on, which we'll talk about. Difficult to achieve planned outcomes, because you're not thinking about the planned outcomes, you're just writing the story as it comes to you. Easily influenced by how you're feeling on any given day. So as cyclical beings, women can definitely put out something that 2 weeks earlier perhaps they would not have written in the same way. So be aware of your moods, your cycles, your energy levels, how much enthusiasm you've got for things. That will really affect what comes out, creating all kinds of chaotic inconsistency in a manuscript. So something to be aware of. Repetition, irrelevance, it can be filled with holes or forgetting important points. Sometimes we just fail to even bring it to a close that's very relevant for the audience. It's harder to follow for the reader, and it can lack cohesion if you have no plan whatsoever and you just write whatever you like. So planning pros: thoughtful, on topic, easy to follow, thorough and relevant content because you've thought this through, factual and straightforward, always having something to sit down to write. I think that's a huge benefit of planning, the fact that you don't ever look at a blank page and go, I don't know what to say, because you know exactly where you are at all times. And if you don't feel, you can still tune into how you're feeling. If you don't feel like writing that next part, you can skip to the next part and know exactly what to write in that part. Like, go for the low-hanging fruit on those days where you're not sure what to write, but you still know exactly what needs to be written. You kind of can really gauge how long it's going to take, because if you've written 50% of what you said you were going to write, you're halfway through the book. So really, really helpful to stay on course. Knowing where you are in the process, that's the next point, and precise wording. So planning can be very precise. Cons to planning, and there are actually quite a lot, which surprises some people, because being a good planner and following through and implementing, that's the virtuous thing, right? So, but there are some downsides. So it's inflexible and rigid. It's potentially going to lead to dry or dull writing, because you know exactly what you have to write and you're so thorough. How much potential for creativity, storytelling, beautiful in the moment, kind of descriptive, you know, how much room is there for that? Or are you just going to tell the information like it is? It can lack texture, it can be void of emotion, because, you know, if you don't feel like writing something but you sit down and write it anyway, just because it's 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning and it's your writing time and you said you were going to write chapter 3, that can lead to writing that's a bit disconnected from your sense of self, from your voice, and all those good things. So yeah, it can be void of emotion, because stories are deliberately selected rather than felt. Grinding to a halt when something doesn't work. So if you stick rigidly to the plan and you try and force it and it's not working, being inflexible about going off plan can just lead to, you know, it just dries up. You can't progress. So and then there's also the risk of getting stuck in research, rinse, repeat cycle. So planning and planning and planning and never actually getting started on fleshing it out to a point of writing fluidly, because it's all in note form. And sometimes I've even received manuscripts where whole sections are still in note form because somebody has forgotten to actually write it up. And I'm like, is this paragraph finished? So that's definitely a thing. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so Bron is saying, after reading my book, after reading Destination Author, you wrote out the contents, foreword, preface as suggested, and was able to easily pick up chapters in my draft I was in the mood for. So I understand that you're in editing phase. I'd love to know how you created the content the first time through. Did you have chapter outlines, or does it follow a straight timeline of the order in which things happened? Because I think you're talking about your amazing travels, which, oh, so jealous. Yeah, I'd love to know how you put it together the first time around. That'd be really interesting. And the last point in planning cons is easy to convince yourself you're writing when you're actually outlining, which is similar to the point before. So in Destination Author, at the end of that chapter, I suggest another approach, which is to blend those two things, and I call it a loose outline. Oh, okay, so you really just, did you do the whole month of NaNoWriMo, Bron? Just day after day? I'll let you type the comment. Yes, so in Destination Author, I really recommend having a loose outline, which is high level plan, knowing when to stop planning and start writing. So you want high level chapters, subsections, and a few bullet points in each section, or a short paragraph of what each section is going to be about. And then I'd like you to get started and not dwell too long in the loose outline. The reason I say this is because all of the cons of both different types of things can be addressed later on. pantsers, you're going to have more editing to do, and that can be painful. Oh, brilliant. Okay, wrote every day of Nano, 75,000 words. Amazing. That's really cool. So NaNoWriMo is it's actually coming up in a week's time, and is, for those of you who don't know what NaNoWriMo is and who don't know what we're talking about in the comments, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Week, which is a 30-day book writing sprint, if you like, where you aim to get 50,000 words of your book done. It's aimed at writing a whole book, if that's sort of what you're aiming for. It's a lot of fiction writers, but it's a great container for just getting some stuff out in a short space of time. Doesn't work for everyone. You know, it depends how consistent you are with your writing. It depends how much space you've got to write. It depends what your brain works like. Consistency for me is very, very difficult. I like longer sessions to get into it, but less frequent. So yeah, it's a helpful container that you can use to get your book done. So even so, whichever way you decide to write it, in terms of like how many sessions you do, how many words you write each session, the way you do it, whether you plan or whether you're a natural planner or whether you're a natural pantser, will change what is needed later on. As I was saying, pantsers are going to need a lot more editing, which can be painful for people who like to go with the flow. Reverse engineering structure, very difficult. But for the planners, reverse engineering feeling, also very difficult, which is why I like to bring the best of both worlds together. Have a loose outline, but not dwell too much in like really, really rigorous, detailed planning before you get started. Know what stories you want to put where. Know what information goes in each chapter, and we've got structure coming up next week, which is going to be a really juicy topic, and obviously always relevant to any kind of book. But yeah, having the best of both worlds will help you avoid those pitfalls of each. Have enough to stay on track, have enough to be creative. That is the goal of the loose outline, and I really encourage you to read the rest of that chapter and make sure that you're not going to get stuck with the downsides of your natural tendency, whatever that is. The bottom line of today: your loose outline is called loose outline, emphasis on the loose, because it is not a rigid plan. It is a working document that you will come back to and update as and when things feel like they need to change, because your book is going to inform you what it wants to be as you go. If you've decided very rigidly right at the beginning what your book is going to be, you're not allowing the book to kind of tell you what it wants to become. And that is definitely the most rewarding side of writing from an author's point of view. Your relationship with your book is very important, and if you just operate from your head and fill it out in the sections that you've said, it's almost like writing a report, not writing a book. And if you just let it flow, it's almost like just journaling rather than writing a book. So take the best of both worlds. Revisit your loose outline as you go. Every few chapters, just check in with where you are, make sure that it still feels good. And later in Destination Author as well, there's loads of suggestions for self-editing and doing like a reverse outline to just check in with, did I do what I said I was going to do, and if not, why not, like that kind of thing. So that comes a bit later. But thank you so much for being here today. I love talking about this stuff because this is where it starts to get really like hands-on, and we actually start to write. And even if you have already started writing, or even if you've finished writing your draft, it can still be really helpful to know this, know your tendency, because it informs the process going forward, especially editing and self-editing. So thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here live as well. It's so awesome. Next week we're going to talk about structure, like I said, and I will be here on Thursday for office hours if you want to bounce any ideas off me, if you're coming up against anything, if you just, you know, are stuck or hating a part of your book, we can workshop it. So I'll pop the Zoom link in there for Thursday afternoon, Brisbane time, and I will see you then or next week in class. Thank you so much. Thanks, Bron. Thanks, Judith, for being here. I really appreciate it. Bye.